The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places. That's Hemingway. And if you've been around this channel for a while, you already know that I am not all that interested in motivational poster versions of life. So when I say that line has stayed with me, I mean it's stayed with me because I keep seeing it. Not in self-help books or inspirational speeches. In people and in comment sections. In 3 sentences somebody types at 11:30 at night when they finally get honest for just a few minutes with strangers on the internet because they don't know where else to put what they're carrying. That is what I want to talk about today. Because I started this channel thinking I was making videos about stress and philosophy and trying to stay sane and healthy in a world that feels like it was designed by raccoons with Wi-Fi. I guess I didn't realize that people were going to show up here carrying real weight. And I think Hemingway understood that way before most people had language for it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rachel. Now, Hemingway is one of those writers people know by reputation before they ever read him. Pulitzer Prize in 1953, Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954, The Old Man and the Sea, A Farewell to Arms, The Sun Also Rises. The man had a shelf. But I think the lit class version of Hemingway misses the bigger point sometimes. He wasn't sitting in a comfortable library inventing dramatic things to say about suffering. He went straight into the hard stuff, repeatedly, and not really in a romantic way. At 18, he was wounded in World War I, drove an ambulance on the Italian front, got hit by mortar fire, carried another soldier to safety while he had over 200 shrapnel fragments in his own legs. 18 years old. Then the Spanish Civil War. He covered it as a war correspondent, and what he saw there eventually became For Whom the Bell Tolls, a book I read in high school without remotely understanding what it had cost him to write it. Then World War II, again as a journalist. He was at Normandy, there for the liberation of Paris, and famously arrived at the Ritz Hotel ahead of the Allied forces, and, by his own account, liberated the bar first, which is either a man with tremendous priorities or just deeply, perfectly Hemingway. Probably a little bit of both. He survived 2 plane crashes in Africa on consecutive days, struggled with alcoholism and depression most of his adult life. He watched his body and his mind deteriorate over years and kept writing anyway. And in 1961, the weight finally won. He died by suicide at 61 years old. That part matters too. Not because it erases everything meaningful he understood, but because it reminds us that grace under pressure isn't something you reach once and then just have. It's a practice, an imperfect one, and Hemingway practiced it under more pressure than most people ever will. The shit he carried would have broken most people decades earlier. He said courage was grace under pressure, not the absence of fear or fearlessness, what you do with it while you're in it. And I think that's why his writing lands so hard with certain people, myself included, because it feels lived in. Hemingway had this writing philosophy called the Iceberg Theory. Only 1/8 of the iceberg should be visible. The deeper meaning sits underneath. Not said, but felt. I read my first Hemingway in high school, For Whom the Bell Tolls, I think, and I couldn't have told you why it hit me the way it did. I just recognized something in it before I had words for it. Same thing later with The Old Man and the Sea. Quiet, kind of sparse writing. But underneath it all was this exhaustion, this tenderness, kind of a grief and dry humor, barely holding itself together with duct tape, which honestly felt a little familiar. Now, if you've been around this channel for a while, you know I love this style. The implication and the innuendo, the reading between the lines. I get comments sometimes to just get to the point, and I get it, but that is not what's happening. There's stuff underneath on purpose. That is the whole point. He called it the Iceberg Theory. It's also called the theory of omission. I had no idea. I just liked it. I think it applies to people even more than pros now, because of what you see of somebody is almost never the entire picture, especially now. A username, a profile picture, a few sentences in a comment section. That's the 1/8 above the water. The other 7/8 is the divorce, the burnout, the grief, the diagnosis, the accident, the addiction recovery, the anxiety attack in a grocery store parking lot, the years spent convinced nobody else felt the way they did. Most people are carrying way more than they ever say out loud. And somehow we have built a culture where everybody feels weirdly alone in that. Which brings me to something Hemingway wrote to a friend. It wasn't from a novel. It was from a letter wrote to F. Scott Fitzgerald in 1934 when Fitzgerald was struggling badly. Hemingway, who had already seen a world of shit and understood something about hard things that most people don't, wrote back with this. Forget your personal tragedy. We are all bitched from the start. You know, that sounds brutal at first, but I don't think he was dismissing the pain. I think he was trying to remove the isolation from it, because underneath that harshness, what he's really saying is, you're not uniquely cursed. That's just part of being human. And weirdly enough, sometimes that's a relief, because people walk around thinking, why am I like this? Why am I struggling this hard? Why does everything feel so heavy? Why does everybody else seem to handle life better than me? Meanwhile, almost everybody is carrying something. Some people are just better performers. Now, here's the full quote from A Farewell to Arms, because the part everyone knows is only half of it. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that will not break, it kills. It kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry. That last line, there will be no special hurry. That's the dark and dry humor that I recognized in high school English class without knowing what to call it. A Nobel and Pulitzer Prize winning novelist basically saying, don't worry, it'll get to you eventually, just no rush. The second half of that quote is the part nobody puts on a coffee mug, and I get why. It's not comfortable. It's not a rallying cry. It's Hemingway being honest about something most of us would rather not look at directly. Hardship doesn't discriminate. It doesn't check your record or reward good behavior. The very good and the very gentle and the very brave are not exempt. We are all bitched from the start. What I think he actually meant goes deeper than a bumper sticker about resilience, you know? That image he's working from is a healed bone. Once a fracture mends, the bone is stronger at the exact site of the break than it was before. That's not poetry, that's biology. The break forces the body to rebuild denser tissue right where the damage was. The broken place becomes the strongest place. But this is the part the inspirational poster always leaves out. The bone has to actually heal. And healing isn't just the same as just not being broken anymore. It's slow. It's not linear. It doesn't look like strength from the outside while it's happening. You can't rush it, and you can't fake it. Now, those that will not break, it kills. I think that's the most important line in the whole thing. What Hemingway is saying is that fighting things you've got zero control over, refusing to bend, refusing to adapt, going to war with reality itself, that's not strength. That's how you get taken down, because the things outside your control are going to happen whether you accept them or not. The only thing that was ever yours was what you did after they landed. Think about a boxer in a ring. You know, you don't control whether you get hit. You're going to get hit. That's the fight. What you control is how you take the punch, how you absorb it, how you move, whether you get back up. A fighter who tenses up against every blow, who won't roll with anything, who fights the punch instead of the opponent, that fighter gets hurt worse and tires faster. The punch lands harder on somebody who won't bend. A TKO, a technical knockout, that's not just losing. That's the referee deciding you cannot continue. It's having the choice taken away from you. That is what Hemingway means. The person who won't bend to anything, who fights every punch, eventually something breaks them past the point of getting back up. The Stoics understood this. Some things are in our control and some things are not. The ones that aren't. Period. Fighting that reality does not change it. It just costs you. Hemingway never called himself a Stoic, but what he was writing about, what you do while you're in it, absorbing what you can't control, choosing to get back up, that is exactly it. So, what does adapting actually look like? It's not lying down. It's not pretending that the punch didn't land or that it didn't hurt. It's absorbing the blow, actually feeling it instead of just white-knuckling your way through it. And then you choose to get back up anyway. Not because you have to like it or because it's fair, but because the alternative is the TKO. And you are not done yet. That's what he was actually talking about. The bone that heals stronger, the fighter who gets back up. Not invincible, not unbroken. Stronger at the broken places. And yet, here we are. When I started this channel, I thought I was making content. I didn't realize I was building a place where people could say things they don't say anywhere else. That changes things. That changes what this whole thing actually is. I try to read every comment, and what I'm reading is 1/8 of something so much bigger. And even that 1/8 is something. People show up here and say, I've never told anyone this, or I've said this before, but nobody got what I meant until just now, or I thought I was the only one. That last one, I get that more than almost anything else. And every time I read it, I think, yeah, of course you did. Because we live in a world that isn't great at letting people be complicated and struggling and still basically be okay. We're good at the highlight reel. The honest accounting is a lot harder to find. So people carry their stuff quietly for a really long time. And then sometimes they stumble onto a corner of the internet where somebody is just talking honestly about hard things, not catastrophizing or wrapping it up in a little bow. And then something loosens a little. Now, I am not taking any credit for that. The people who show up and say something real in the comment section, that takes guts. That's them. They get the credit. I just showed up and talked. They're the ones who decided to be seen, even just a little bit, just the 1/8. And what they've shown me consistently is that this comment section is full of people who have been through some serious shit. Real stuff, not small inconveniences, actual weight. And they're still here, still thinking, still curious enough to watch a video about a dead novelist on a Monday and leave a comment that makes me think for the rest of the day. Cynicism and cruelty are easy. Numbing out is easy. Staying soft without becoming naive, that is the hard one. Some of the strongest people I've ever come across are people nobody would look at and immediately think, damn, that person is strong. They're just still here, still trying, still reflective, still willing to connect, and somehow still capable of humor. That is not weakness. That is people being strong at the broken places. Not performing strength or pretending the breaks didn't happen, just getting back up, still in the fight. My story got this channel started. Their stories, your stories, are what keep it going. That is not a small thing to realize about something you've built, because it means this wasn't really mine. It was always going to be ours, mine and the people who showed up and decided to stay and share 1/8 that they were willing to put above the waterline. Every comment that says, I thought I was the only one, is somebody offering up their piece of the iceberg. And the more people show up, the more the whole shape becomes visible. None of us is the whole iceberg. Not me, not you, not the person who wrote a few sentences in a comment section about something they'd never said out loud before. We are all showing the world 1/8 of who we are and what we carry. And somehow that's enough. The world breaks everyone. Hemingway wasn't wrong about that. Wasn't wrong about the second half either. Hardship doesn't discriminate. The very good and the very gentle and the very brave are not exempt. And we are all bitched from the start, with no special hurry about any of it. True, all of it. Not going to tell you otherwise. But the first part, the part that everybody quotes and immediately moves on from, afterward, many are strong at the broken places. I've seen that. Not in an abstract, inspirational kind of way, in the 1/8 of an iceberg way. In a comment from somebody who said they'd never told anyone, or from someone who said they finally felt heard. And in the people who show up here every week with whatever they're carrying and still finding something worth engaging with. That is the evidence. Hemingway lived what he wrote, all of it, the grace and the weight and everything in between. So, it turns out, do a lot of you. Thanks for watching. Take care, you, and I will see you the next time. Bye-bye. Oh, and for anybody wondering, Reggie is sitting over there under a tree. He has treed a squirrel, and he's not letting it down. I'll see you later.